Hello everyone. Sorry, I know it's been a few weeks since I last recorded a video. My apologies. But today, it's another writing video, so if that's not your thing, I understand. We're going to talk about the fact that setting is its own character. Now, I'll give you a few good examples. In the movie Black Panther, which if you haven't seen it, I don't know why, it's an amazing movie. The nation of Wakanda is its own character. It really is. From the garb that everyone wears to the inventions that they constantly have, the high tech um, flying cars, the clothing that it becomes shields, things like that. Wakanda is its own character. It's completely unique, and the setting actually helps in it brings the story together. And ultimately, that's what a good setting should do. A good setting should be a character that brings the story together. It actually enriches the story. Another example, if you have not seen the show Altered Carbon on Netflix, it's another one I recommend. I really, really got a big kick out of it. I thought it was really awesome. That futuristic setting is its own character. It really is. It helps create the atmosphere of the show, which is very dark and oppressive and almost unhuman. And that really, really helps bring the story to life. The reason this is important, having setting be its own character, is because unless you write a story that exists, let's say it's two characters talking, sitting at a table in a white room, there's no windows, there's no door, the two characters are there at the table white plastic, the chairs are white chairs, and there's nothing distracting about it. And it's just a conversation between the two characters. You could write a story like that, in which case that's it. But if you look at it, that also means that that setting is still its own character. And the reason being is because the author has chosen to set this story there for some reason. Maybe they want the reader to focus exclusively on the dialogue and the interaction between the two characters. Maybe they want to drive home a point. Maybe the setting is actually used as a metaphor. These kind of things do happen, but for the most part, you need to actually give your setting just as much attention as you do your characters. Now, whether you're creating a world for role playing or you're creating a setting for a fictional book that you are working on, you also have to remember that the reader does not need to know every little detail of this world. In fact, sometimes less is more. Knowing that the guards work 12-hour shifts, 3 days a week, 1 week, and then 4 days a week the next week, not really that important unless it reflects on a incident in the story. If there's a scene in the story where they need to know that the guards work these shifts so they can plan a heist, plan an infiltration, plan assassination, things of that nature. Unless it's important to the story, the reader knowing this detail doesn't do them any good. It really doesn't. And it may make a difference to you, the creator. You may be like, well, no, I have this whole socioeconomic plan for how this world works and stuff like that. And that's great. Your readers aren't going to care for the most part. And I don't mean that maliciously. I just mean the average reader reading your book is not going to care. If it doesn't drive the story forward, if it's just window dressing, there is such a thing as too much. Readers love filling in the gaps with their imagination about how a world is, which is why we have such a prevalent amount of fan fiction in today's day and age. They love filling in the little details. They love going, oh, hey, the author mentioned something about blank. So taking that means that this happens and this doesn't happen and this happens and what if this happened? The readers love that. In fact, you are doing a disservice to your readers if you try to paint a complete picture about everything in that world. The reason being is because we do a lot of our best work when we are using our imagination and our own life experiences to fill in the gaps in the stories. Not deliberate gaps, we're not talking about like an obvious plot hole where you're like, the writer really should have mentioned that the guards rotate in these shifts, because otherwise it wouldn't have made sense why they were waiting until nightfall when their mark was on a rotating shift to infiltrate the palace, as an example. In those cases, yeah, you do need to fill in the details. But other than that, leave something to the imagination of the readers. I mean, you'd be surprised what they can come up with. And if it differs than what you as a creator have thought of, and that's okay too. Unless it contradicts something that you have planned later on, in which case you don't necessarily have to address the conflict. You just create what you're going to create. And if somebody says, well, I thought blank to blank to blank, you could say, well, I understand you thought that, but there was information I had to keep holding on to for it to impact the next story, the next role-playing session, things of that nature. So, it is important to put as much detail into your setting as it is into your characters, but you also, just like with characters, you need to leave a little bit of a blank space for the readers to fill in. It actually helps connect your readers and your players, if you're playing a role-playing game, to the story more. If it's not an imagined setting, in other words, if it's based on a real-world setting, for example, if you're setting your story in 1950s New York City, then it becomes different, unless it's on an alternate Earth where dragons rule New York City and fairies are hitmen, which sounds like a cool story. If you want to use it, please go ahead. I mean, but unless you're doing something like that, if you're using a real world setting, you need to A, do your research, and B, need to make sure that it sounds authentic. I live in Las Vegas. Nothing bugs me more than when I see a show or a movie that's set in Vegas and they take, at most you could describe it as liberties with our city's geography. Usually it annoys the living crap out of me. It is so frustrating. And I'm like, really? Those two areas of town don't even connect. And the characters drove for 5 minutes and went from point A to point B, which is 25 miles away. And at that time of day, there's no way they made that. That kind of stuff. That bugs me. So, if you are going to set your story in a real-world setting that you don't have first-hand intimate knowledge of, you need to make sure you do your research. Because nothing will throw a reader out of the immersion into a story as much as something that's glaringly wrong with the setting. You said something in New York City, and it's set in the winter, and all the characters are talking about how hot it is, for example. I mean, that's a really glaringly obvious example, but the example still stands. Even the most casual reader would go, wait a minute, New York City, that's in the northeast coast of America. That would be cold in the winter. It would not be blisteringly hot. Those kind of things. You got it. In this case, the devil is in the details. You want to make the city as detailed as possible because it will help influence your setting. Some people view New York City as a very scary place with lots of crime and lots of danger lurking around every corner. And so if you are writing a story like that, you need to make sure that the setting reflects it. Have it set in a seedier part of town. Have rough and tumble characters constantly be interacting with the main characters and things of that nature. If, however, you're envisioning a New York City where it's more like a hipster suburban paradise, that kind of thing, then you would set it in a different part of New York City, and you'd have different characters interact, and you would things of that nature. The setting does influence the story big time. So, coming up on 10 minutes, that's all I have for today. If you like the video, please go ahead and leave a like down below. If you want to subscribe, I know I'm not being as prolific as I would want to be, but if I don't have necessarily anything I want to talk about, I don't want to make a video just to make a video. That seems like a waste of everybody's time. You for watching it and me for creating it. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope it gave you some insight about why setting is so important to your story or role-playing game, because ultimately a role-playing game is a story that the GM and the players create together. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching.